already. All these
Wonderful.
freedom, so good. What does freedom mean to me? Freedom is all about that wheel of wealth I talked about yesterday. And there's a very specific reason for that, because I just recently discovered that wheel of wealth and it changed my life exponentially. So some of you have heard my story. Some of you have heard bits and pieces of it. When I grew up, my dad was my biggest cheerleader. He was everything. He always told me that I could be, do, have anything I wanted. And I believed that to be true as I was growing up. I had a pretty happy child life. There was a few things that happened and Dad and I butted heads, but for the most part, I had a really happy childhood until I was 16 years old and he was ripped out of my life. He passed away suddenly of a heart attack, and I was there when he died. And I knew deep in my soul that he was already gone. And I remember just standing there and looking at Mom, and Mom being in disbelief. And I just stood there and I said, he's already dead. He's already dead. And I just kept saying it over and over and over again. And of course, she didn't want to believe it. So within a couple of years after that, I started making really bad decisions. In his death, I came up with a few beliefs that had stayed with me for quite some time. Number one, the physical world was meant to be manipulated and it wasn't worth it because everything would abandon me anyway. I believed that everyone and everything would leave me suddenly without me having any clue that it was coming. And absolute shame. I don't know why shame became a belief from my dad dying, but it did. And I started making very poor decisions. You name the bad decision, this girl made it. I ended up smoking weed. I took my final years of high school through correspondence because of a bad decision from my science teacher. And I barely graduated from high school. Before my dad passed away, I was a straight A student. I was getting 100% in physics. And weird now that I'm a quantum physics geek. Isn't that funny? So after he died, and then I started smoking weed, fell in with the wrong crowd. I moved to a different province, and in that fell in with an even worse crowd. And I started snorting cocaine up my nose. And I was highly addicted to cocaine for 3 years in a series of abusive relationships, both emotionally and physically abusive. And I didn't care. I didn't care. I had so much shame in my body. And I was so caught up in the physical that I felt like I deserved to be punched in the face. I felt that I wasn't worthy of any life that was better than that. And in that, I was addicted to cocaine for 3 years. I was going for a week without eating, without sleep. I was sleeping around. I was just abusing every part of me. I was abusing my soul, my heart, my body, my mind. I was lost. And then I had a moment, a dark night of the soul moment, when I was in a fight with my mom. She knew something was happening, but she didn't know what it was. And she just looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And in that moment, I surrendered. And I hit my knees and I said, "No, I need help." But my mom and I agreed that traditional counseling and rehab and 12-step program wasn't for me. I've always been the rebel. And I knew that that sort of treatment wasn't going to work for me. So she sent me to a friend who had helped people with cocaine addiction before, and he put me on his couch, took away my phone and my car keys. And for 3 weeks, all I did was smoke weed and eat a lot of soup, because that was all my body could handle at the time. Smoking weed helped me to amplify my appetite so that I could eat. After that, I made a decision that if I left his house and got my car keys and my phone back, I knew I was going to go straight back into that lifestyle. And so I decided, in my rebelliousness, to skip the country. And I researched where in the world I could go that had the death penalty if you do drugs. So I moved to Jakarta, Indonesia for a year. And I taught English there for a year, knowing that if I got myself into trouble, I would die. And that was the limit that was on me. It wasn't going to jail. It wasn't getting into trouble. It wasn't even like hurting myself. It was death that was scary enough for me. So I lived in Indonesia for a year. It was a terrible, horrible experience, every minute of it, but I had a lot of fun within it. But I wasn't ready to come home. So I researched again. And where else can I go in the world that gives you a really bad penalty for doing drugs? And so I moved to Dubai, and I lived in Dubai for a year. Learned so much there. But in that, what I realized is I was searching for myself. I was searching for the answers of who I was, because I had lost myself at age 16. I didn't know who I was anymore. And all I was doing was abusing myself. Even in Jakarta and in Dubai, I was drinking until I was blind. I was diagnosed with bronchitis 9 months out of the 12 that I was there. And I almost died of pneumonia in a third world country. And I didn't even phone my mom to tell her. So I finally made a decision to come home. My mom got really, really sick. She was in the hospital, and I decided it was time for me to return home because I didn't want to leave my mom in a hospital by herself. My brother was also overseas at the time. So I decided to come home and quickly fell into bad experiences again and bad decisions. I didn't fully go back into addiction, but there were relapses. I was making poor decisions and got myself right back into abusive relationships yet again. And I just kept seeking. At this point, I had never held a job for more than a year. I was lost, and I was so desperate to understand what my purpose was on this planet. I couldn't figure it out. So I skipped through job after job after job, lost my license to a DUI, amazing relationships of abuse that I am so fucking grateful for now. I was not in the moment. And then I was bartending, and this was actually the first job that I'd ever held for more than a year. I had held a job for 3 years, and here comes the power of 3. Because in my 3rd year of bartending, showing up for work drunk every day, I had a baseball bat behind the bar. It was a dive bar. And that baseball bat was meant for protection for me because I was left alone to close the bar at night. And one particular evening, closing the bar, I had a man jump over the bar and try to attack me. And I had to grab the baseball bat. I didn't use it, but I had to threaten him with it. And it was in that moment that I decided I was done. I was done. I was more than this. And the universe, in its wonderful and mysterious ways, I got in my car that night and drove home. And the song that came on the radio was I Am the Fire by Hailstorm. I'll post it in the Facebook group later. I listened to that song on repeat for 6 hours as I went onto Google and started researching career paths because I was so done. So I went back to school as a mature student for event and promotions management. I did not want to be an event manager, and I figured that out very quickly in the first 3 months of school. But what I did discover was that I was capable, and I started seeing my potential again. And in that, I decided to start my own business. So while I was in college, I started my business as a virtual assistant, and I started supporting entrepreneurs, healers, coaches, trainers, teachers behind the scenes. I was really good at technology, still am. I could figure it out. But I was so caught up in the physical, and I had done so many personal development courses. I had geeked out on every course. I actually labeled myself the course whore because I kept looking for something. Somebody give me the answers. It's got to be there somewhere. So in building this business and finishing college, part of our curriculum was to volunteer at a live event. And I happened to volunteer at a live event here in Kelowna with 150 beautiful women in the room who were my ideal client. And I built my business off the backbone of that event. I walked out of that room with 7 clients. I met so many people. And one of those humans was Joy Kingsborough. And I remember going, I don't know about all this woo-woo shit. Like, I'm not buying into this. Numerology, you gotta be kidding me. Tarot cards, come on. That's just way too woo-woo for me. I'm a scientist. I am a physics geek. Tarot cards? Nah. And then Joy put out a tarot group. And she was doing numerology forecasts on her Mystic Mornings every morning. And there was something that drew me to her, and I started following her. And every morning for 5 minutes, I would listen to her message, and something clicked. And I didn't know what it was. And I kept saying, this is way too woo-woo for me, but something made sense. And so I kept following her. And then she hired me to help her at an event. And in that event, she was talking about all the mirrors. And I was like, what? I don't get it. I have no idea what you're talking about. The mirror is the physical thing that I'm looking in. How can humans be a mirror? I was so confused. I had no idea. About a year went by and she messaged me and said, I don't know what it is. You keep coming up in my meditations. I need to talk to you. We had an hour-long conversation and she invited me to work with her for a year. In that moment, I was like, I can't afford to work with you. I have no idea where I'm going to find that money, but I know that I can't afford not to work with you. My whole body was screaming, yes. And it wasn't because she had the answers. It was because she was going to show me how to find the answers. And the first thing I did was brain game. And I'll tell you what, I was not a star student. I didn't do the best job in the first round of brain game. I was like, I don't know what this is. It's woo-woo. Well, yeah, I'll do my homework. I'll do the thing. But even as the C+ student, I transformed. Something shifted in me in that moment, and I became obsessed. And I, at the time, didn't know it, but was harassing Joy. Let me teach it. 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 And we had a dream. I started with this dream of brain game being a household verb, and Joy and I have the same dream. And so in taking the brain game, I transformed my life. I started understanding how the mirrors work. I started understanding how my brain worked. And the brain game is very scientific, so it worked really well for my personality too. It allowed me to see the woo-woo, the magic, and the science, and how they all tied together. It allowed me to see how the cycle of divine timing works in our favor all the time. And it allowed me to land into absolute joy and gratitude for the decisions that I made in my life, even when I was 20 and high as a kite. I look back at that time of my life and I want to cry with gratitude because it brought me to where I am today. And then MindSHIFT came along. And Joy was running a partner program. And at the time, I was broke. I was broke. I was borrowing from the money, but borrowing from the bank of mom, wondering how I was going to pay my rent. This was a year ago. In August of 2020, I was still doing VA work. I was teaching brain game, but also doing VA work, working with clients who were fully out of alignment with who I am because I thought I needed the money. Talk about purpose shame. I was doing work that I was good at, but I fucking hated. It was making me miserable. I was still drinking so much because I hated my life. I hated who I was. I hated how I was showing up. I hated how I was expressing myself. But I had all the tools. Why couldn't I figure it out? And before MindSHIFT started in August of 2020, I woke up and I received this download. And to this day, I am in awe of how this occurred. I woke up and I was like, I just need to write this down. And I grabbed my journal and I wrote down quantum numerologist and wealth activator. I had no idea what that meant. As I wrote it down, I was like, what? What is a quantum numerologist? I was a numerologist. I was a certified numerologist, but I didn't know what this whole quantum thing meant. Joy and I had had a few conversations about it. And wealth activator? I was broke. I couldn't even pay my rent at the end of the month. How could I claim that? But I made a decision. I made a decision that I was going to feel wealthy right then and there. And so MindSHIFT was my journey of wealth. And in MindSHIFT, there's a course called Money Mojo. I took that course. It's a 5-day course. And I leaned in. I leaned in fully and completely willing to do the work. And in that, recognized how much purpose shame I was carrying, how ashamed I was of myself for the work that I was doing that was so not me. How ashamed I was of myself that I wasn't expressing myself to the world in the brain game dream that I have for our life, for the world. I was so ashamed. And so I just let that rise up. And I'll tell you what, it rose up. I was sick for a couple of weeks after that, but it was so worth it because I fired all my clients. I walked away. I said, you're done, you're done, you're done. I'm not working with you anymore. I'm not working with you anymore. I am choosing only to work with clients that are aligned with my vision, who believe in the vision, who want the same things. And I stopped doing VA work, period. I made a lot of money doing VA work, but I wasn't willing to go there anymore. Within 3 months, I had my first $20,000 month. 6 months after that, after August, so 3 months after my $20,000 month, I had a $35,000 month. And 9 months after that decision, I became the COO of a 7-figure impact business. Now, I'm not telling you these numbers because it's not about the fucking money. I'm telling you these numbers because that's how quickly you can shift when you start from the inside. I made a decision to feel wealthy. And in that decision, everything changed. I made a decision to commit to feeling wealthy every single day, even when the bank account was not reflecting that back to me. Even when I was panicking, letting go of clients who were paying me $1,000 a month and saying, no, I can't work with you anymore. And they were begging me to keep them. And I kept saying, no, 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 I choose me and I am fucking wealthy. And I was devoted to that. And I used the tools of the brain game every single day of devotion. Just keep going, trust, just keep going. What's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? And I trusted. And I voxered joy a lot. I had the support of a community that believed in me and I stayed connected to that community, but I kept going inside. I am wealthy. And the money started to show up. The money was all about the flow, the internal flow that I had created. So thinking about that wheel of wealth, I created relationships for myself that were supportive. I leaned into being more vulnerable and intimate in those relationships. I started loving myself more, 1% more every day, 1% more every day. I started believing in myself, 1% more every day. I started taking care of myself. Instead of laying flat on the couch, eating a bag of potato chips and drinking myself into oblivion every night, I chose to start going for walks and start dancing around the living room. I started loving on my body. I started asking my body, what do you need? Instead of forcing it to do things it didn't want to do. And I started paying attention to my relationship with money. It wasn't just, I am wealthy and I'm not going to do anything about it. There are actions that need to happen, but it was the what's next. I was so caught up in that 0.1%. Thinking that if I just worked a little harder, pushed a little harder, was more worthy somehow, if I expressed my value somehow in the world just a little bit more by working harder, by producing more, I was the get shit done girl. That was my name. Because everybody knew, oh, just ask Cindy, she can do it. I was pushing so hard. I was working 17-hour days, 7 days a week. I was drinking while I was working. Now, I have so much spaciousness in my schedule. I spend so much time tapped into myself, feeling wealthy, dancing around the living room, running queue, connecting with an amazing community, spending time adventuring in my intimate relationships, my family, my friends. Everything around me reflects the wheel of wealth that's occurring inside of me. And my bank account just happens to reflect that too. So if an ex-cocaine addict and someone who abused the fuck out of herself can change her life in 9 months, so can you. Thank you.